What's up, YouTube? This is 82 and welcome back. So, I did a video called They Lied About Wilt Chamberlain, and another player that I think as time is going on is starting to get lied about more and more is Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. And there's a YouTuber, he's a good friend of mine. I'd encourage everybody to go check out his channel, go subscribe. It's Too Raw for TV. That's the number 2, Raw, number 4, TV. He did a video covering this. So, what we were talking about is I don't want to say it's specifically a basketball page, because this page covers football and other sports as well. But the Facebook page goes by White Stephen A. Smith, and he made a post a few days ago that upset quite a few people. And he said, quote, and you can read it on your screen, "Kareem is the luckiest big in history of the league. He came in 1969 when Wilt and Bill were done. Got a Hall of Fame point guard in Oscar to help him win his first ring. Gets traded to the Lakers and wins MVP without making the playoffs. From 1972 to 1979, he was Wilt Chamberlain, just putting up stats, not winning anything. Had pretty much zero competition at the center position in the mid to late 70s. As a Laker from 76 to 79, he couldn't win. Wouldn't be a top 10 player if it weren't for Magic helping him win 5 more rings. He had played in the I think he's saying had he played earlier in the 60s, he wouldn't be a top 10 player. So let's unpack this, right? So many stupid comments in this. First of all, you can't really say a player is lucky because of how he's drafted or the situation, because you can do that with anyone. So Kareem coming into the league after Bill Russell retires, okay, that's just how it played out. What do you want him to do? You can't penalize him for that. And if you want to do that, you could penalize any player for that matter. Which I'm not saying you should, but you could use the argument, well, Shaq didn't start winning championships until the centers in the 90s got old. Or you could say Jordan didn't start winning championships until Magic and Bird were gone, so to speak, and the Pistons were old. Whatever. My point is, I think it's really stupid to put an asterisk on a player just because they played in a certain time. Yeah, you can look at it in terms of assessing the player's game, like saying, okay, I know he played this way in this era, and he had this level of competition. How would he fare against a level of competition in a different era? But I don't think you can put an asterisk on it, because that was just the history of it. But all that said, it's interesting how he wants to diminish him for having a point guard in Oscar Robertson and Magic Johnson. Well, Oscar didn't win any championships before Kareem. You know, they needed each other. And that's the thing, right? Magic didn't win any championships after Kareem. He took his team back to the NBA Finals in 1991. Basketball is a team sport. I've never really liked this argument. Well, they only won because they played with so and so. That's the point of the game. You want to build the best team you can. Yeah, as a fan, you may not like the team. Like, I hated when Kevin Durant joined the Warriors. I thought it wasn't fair, but that's part of the game. So, you can't really diminish the guy for playing with good point guards. And he held his own. It's not like, for example, when he was playing with Magic Johnson, it's not like Kareem was being carried by Magic. because in the earlier 80s, like 1980, for example, Kareem won MVP, and he should have actually, in my opinion, won Finals MVP. Although I do know he won it in 85, which he was pretty old at that point. It just goes to show you his longevity, how long he was able to stay good for. Into the mid 80s, he was neck and neck with Magic for best player on the team. And in 85, he was 37 years old, and he had a really great finals performance against the Boston Celtics. He averaged 25.7 points per game, 9.0 rebounds per game, and 5.2 assists. It's funny, people don't give him credit for that. And it didn't stop there. As the 80s kept going on, they'd win in 87 and 88. He didn't play as much minutes in 88, for example. He was playing 28 minutes per game, but he was 40 years old, and he was still able to contribute more than any other 40-year-old you can think of. So I don't really like this argument that he was only great because of his teammates when he was either number 1 or number 2 on that Lakers team. And we all know he was number 1 on the Bucks, obviously. But let's get into the next stupid point he makes here. He says he didn't have any competition. Well, I just don't understand this. The center position was very deep in the 70s. Kareem was battling Willis Reed. He was battling Artis Gilmore, Bill Walton, Nate Thurmond, Bob Lanier, Bob McAdoo. He had a lot of competition, man. So I really don't think this guy has researched the history of the game. Because how can you say he didn't have competition? That'd be like somebody in 20 years from now saying Kevin Durant didn't have any opposition at the small forward position, or LeBron didn't have any. We all know this, we all know that they have competition like Kawhi, KD, LeBron. It'd be ridiculous, right? So why is it okay to lie about Kareem's competition in his era? All you have to do is research the players of back then and look into them for yourself. And, even looking past his competition, like in terms of Hall of Famers or All-Stars, there was a lot of good centers that were just played a role. What I mean by that is guys like Mark Eaton that were just great shot blockers, great defenders. Kareem would have to battle guys like this, Manute Bol. The list goes on. And Hakeem Olajuwon, of course, you can't forget him. Patrick Ewing. So I really don't understand this argument. He had no competition. And one thing he says here is Wilt and Bill were done. I think what he's trying to say is Wilt was done, not in terms of being retired. I think he means he was done with his prime, which is kind of true because Wilt had knee issues in the late 60s. But that didn't stop him from being one of the best players in the league in the early 70s. It's just his role shifted when he was on the Lakers. What I mean by this is he was playing with Elgin Baylor, Jerry West, Gail Goodrich. There was already a bunch of scorers. So what Wilt did was he said, I'm going to play like Bill Russell. I'm going to focus on defense, outlet passing, getting the rebounds. And it didn't mean he couldn't score anymore because there were still games where he'd get 45 points, 50 points. It's not that he couldn't score anymore. And he had a lot of matchups with Kareem Abdul-Jabbar in the early 70s. Like you look at the 1971 Western Conference Finals, 72. So I don't think it's fair to say Wilt was done. I just think that's a stupid argument to make too. Now, what he says about uh, him winning MVP in 1976, well, this has kind of always been a critique I had about Kareem. And I think you can make a legit argument that Kareem is probably one of the greatest players of all time in terms of, or you could say he's the greatest of all time in terms of overall accolades. When you look at his high school basketball record at Power Memorial, you look at his college record at UCLA, or, he was a winner at all levels. So, if you look at, I always thought it was a valid critique about him winning MVP in 1976 when the team didn't even make the playoffs. But I think the argument is sometimes people have this notion that MVP literally means the best player in the league. And that's not what it means. It means the most valuable to a team. So in 75-76, he averaged 27.7 points per game, 4.1 blocks per game, 1.5 steals per game, 5.0 assists per game, 16.9 rebounds per game, and on 52% shooting. What more can you do for your team with those kind of numbers? And it's interesting how I'm not saying everybody is like this. Not every LeBron fan, or, I hate picking on LeBron. But it's funny how you hear like LeBron fans like this Facebook page called White A. Steven Smith, where, when LeBron has a good stat line, like where he missed the playoffs, I think it was this year, and back in 2019 on the Lakers, his first year there, I think it was 2019. Yeah, 2019. It's funny how he wanted LeBron to win MVP in 2019. He wanted LeBron to win MVP this year. He said, records don't matter. But how come you're shitting on Kareem Abdul-Jabbar for his team not making the playoffs but winning MVP? And it's not just LeBron. I mean, Steph Curry last year, when they lost to the play-in to LeBron James, I heard many people saying he should have won MVP. So I really think this argument's hypocritical. I think they're just biased towards their players. And it's very obvious, I think there's a narrative now to get rid of these older players. And by get rid of them, I mean like completely wipe them away from the history books. And you can't shit on Kareem for missing the playoffs but having an amazing season, but then saying LeBron should win MVP. Stay consistent with your argument. And another thing that's so inconsistent here, he's talking about how had he played in the early 60s, he wouldn't even be a top 10 player. So 1 minute he's saying, oh, he's lucky he didn't play in the 60s against Wilt and Bill. But then the next minute you're saying, oh, but he wouldn't even be a top 10 player. So let me get this straight. The 60s were trash. Everybody was trash back then. They were plumbers. Right? That's what you say 1 minute. But then the next minute you say, but if Kareem played in that era, he would get manhandled by them. So what you're saying is this era that you say, quote, is plumbers would dominate Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. But then you would say that if he actually played in that era, that he wouldn't even be a top 10 player. When Wilt and Bill are still top 10 players in most people's minds. You see how hypocritical that is? I don't understand it. So, Kareem, to me, I've always said he's a top 3 player of all time. I don't think that's even a question. You look at all of his accolades. He's an all-time scoring leader. He's got 6 MVPs, 6 championships. And a lot of people like to bring longevity into the equation now. So look at his longevity, 19-time All-Star. So there's an active agenda to shit on old players, and I really don't understand it. So let me know what you guys think down below. Thanks for watching.